And we actually ran an A/B test, and this was what I was telling you before we turned the mics on. One ad saying like a significant discount, like 40% discount or something, and another ad, same ad, and just left out that discount. It actually got a far higher click-through rate, not putting the discount in, because I think at some point, you cheapen your brand.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the eComm Growth Show.
Let's go.
Oh, look at so many mugs on the table.
Rob's really thirsty, dude.
Whoa! Who wants to open it? You want me to open it?
Yeah, you always open.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the eComm Growth Show. Today is going to be super exciting and fun because we have Alex Trokey with us. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
So
Excited
Alex,
to be here.
Yeah, man. So Alex is one of our account managers here at Shopanova, and today we're gonna discuss some important metrics in an online store that are oftentimes overlooked. Maybe people don't actually think about them when they should be. And what's cool is you're able to speak to that from personal experience, having worked with the clients that you work with and stuff like that. But before we dive into that, I want to ask a fun question here. Actually, Dan wants to ask a fun question.
Let me ask this question. Alex, what is something you're into this week?
What is something I'm into this week? I'm really, it's such a nerdy thing. I'm really into Bitcoin right now.
Oh,
okay.
Are you guys into this at all?
No.
I own about $100 of Bitcoin. That's it.
Okay. It's been on like a tear recently. I'm like one of those classic Robinhood trading bros. And it's just like an interesting technology. It's like one of these stories I've followed for a long time. And I always tell people I bought it for like $100 in 2014 and then sold it for like 200 and thought I was a genius. And now it's like 13 grand. I was like, I could have retired if I would have just...
That would have held on to it.
Yeah, exactly. But it's amazing that it's like hung on this long as an asset class, and it's starting to get a lot of like institutional looks at it. I'm a finance guy, so like this is stuff that I'm excited about.
Just gets you going.
Yeah.
What about you guys? Something more fun than Bitcoin?
Dude, one thing that I've just really been into is where I live, there's been quite a bit of wildlife wandering into my yard. And so like in the morning we'll wake up and the sun's just coming up, it's just getting light. And dude, we'll look out in the yard, and the other day we had 6 moose in our yard, 3 of which were bull moose.
What?
And dude, they were going crazy. Like these moose were fighting, they're hitting their racks against each other. And dude, my kids just love that. They eat it up. Now my wife's doing all this research, like where they're at in their like in the rut, like in their mating season, like what behaviors are they doing that she can identify in her research. And so
that's amazing.
Weird things like these moose, it sounds disgusting, but like the bull will go and pee in this mud hole and then lay down and like roll all around it, and then the other moose will go roll around in it, and it's this weird way of them attracting each other and putting out the vibe to start mating. So I'm pretty
What if humans still did that kind of behavior in the rut? I mean, that'd be insane.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
so pretty in the moose.
All right, let's go
I've been
ahead.
to a couple bars that are like close to that.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Almost that gross.
So, guys, mine's going to be a little bit boring, but I've been into Imagineering this week. How Disney was made, and it's super interesting just to see their whole journey, but also see behind the scenes of all the theme parks. And just say I really want to go to Disney now.
Have you ever been?
I have. I've been to Disney World and Disneyland, but there's like one in Hong Kong, one in Japan, like all over the place that all have different features that look pretty sick.
Nice.
Dude, I want to go to Star Wars Land.
Ooh,
wherever that one is.
There's one in Disney World now that looks super epic.
Yeah.
Crazy. All right, Rob, pop us off. Get real now.
Well, so anyways, we kind of presented the topic to you, Alex, and we're not necessarily going in order of like, this is the most important metric you got to watch as a store, but more just like when we're looking at this whole thing of, using marketing to grow your online store, what are some valuable metrics, some important metrics that people should be looking at, and in your experience maybe have overlooked at times?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great question. I love this because as an account manager, you're not just calling them and like managing the ad campaign. These are small businesses, and so you have to like look at the big picture, and like you end up kind of coaching people through how do you think about marketing, how do you think about growing your business. And
can I just stop 1 second right there?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
what you said is so good, because a part of your job is like consulting the business as a whole, which I don't think a lot of agencies do, because they're hiring us basically to manage their Facebook and Instagram ads. Well, if we do that really well and they're falling short in all the other areas of the business, it almost looks like we fail as an agency because they're not able to scale holistically, and it just kind of falls apart. So I think that the fact that you're coming in and consulting them on different aspects of their business is pretty massive.
Yeah,
Dude, and it's so easy to get into a frame of mind where you're only focusing on what feels the most threatening, like a lack of sales. And so you just put like everything you can into launching ads, getting sales and stuff like that. But if you have an inability to look at the big picture, it's only going to last for so long. And maybe you'll get at the end of a growth spurt or a spike in sales or something. And if you don't have your ducks in a row, like it's going to be hard to sustain a low period until you hit another big spike in sales.
Totally.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like, to make a metaphor to fishing, right? Because we know this, like you can't get fish unless like the crew's got to be fed, like the net's got to come in and out, the boat's got to work. Like if any of those things aren't working, you're not going to catch fish, right? And so whatever, we might be hired as the net experts or something, right? It's a limited metaphor, but
Everyone's like, what are they talking about?
But you got to look at, we might be hired to run Facebook and Instagram ads, but sometimes you do have to look at the whole thing, and it's like if something's not working somewhere else, then you're not going to get that growth. And so
Totally.
you don't want to shift blame onto the client, like, well, the ads are working but your thing isn't. But like sometimes you do have to look at, okay, what items are you selling, like what are your margins, is the pricing correct, like you gotta what's the conversion value on the website, like is there something messed up in the process there? You got to look at it holistically.
Totally, yeah.
Dude, one of the most frustrating things I've experienced personally is when I've hired somebody to come in, consult me on our agency, and be a business coach, is sometimes if the strategy they've rolled out for me doesn't work, the next best thing for them is to like say I'm falling short in another area, or like piling one more thing on that I should try to do. And so I think there's a difference between what we do when we're holistically consulting them, being their biggest advocate and helping them get a frame of mind on the big picture. It's not like we're saying, we're not trying to do blame shifting, but that happens. That happens, and that's something online stores need to be careful about when they are hiring an agency. Is like one of the ones we hear from prospects all the time is, it's like, I was working with this agency, we weren't getting results, but it seems like every time I checked in with them, they had something to blame. Like Facebook changed their algorithm and they need to like write it out, but that doesn't happen like every 2 weeks, and they just have all these common things where the agency is blaming some external force on the lack of results. But I'm just trying to point out that this is entirely different. You still need to be able to point out things that may not be working, and together create a picture of what's going to work for that online store.
Absolutely. And then, to your point about metrics, I mean, when you're looking at Facebook ad campaigns, a lot of things you're looking at is return on ad spend, right? That's a cash flow metric to me. It's how much money are you getting back in a short window of time? And that's a cash flow metric based on revenue too. And it leaves out a lot of different metrics. So one big one that I'm into is average order value is one that I'm starting to question a lot. One of my clients recently, it's a higher end women's boutique out of the Midwest. We started the strategy of, because it's higher end, they would have, their online store had about half the average order value as an in-store customer. And that was kind of like an assumption that is what was going to happen when we launched the ad campaign. And we started by trying to attract customers with sort of lower end products, like here's the accessible one, thinking if you bring them into the business that they're going to start shopping more expensive stuff eventually. And what we found was, they kind of struggled along at a, 1 times return. They're like maybe getting their money out of it. But they're a small boutique and they had low stock, and we were just like running ads all the time. And if, a couple items didn't work, they were really struggling. One change that we made was, how can we get this average order value higher, and how can we get people to shop more expensive items? And so they started making videos and ads about, videos and image ads about full outfits, right? And we would drop them on like a collection or a new arrival page rather than a specific product. And what that did was women would want to shop the whole look or the whole outfit, and their average order value went up from like $70 online to $100 to like $250 plus.
Dang. Wow.
I mean, I was shocked by the increase.
Yeah, totally.
Honestly.
Dude.
And so they're buying a mix of those, higher end and lower end items. And it's also a way for the client to differentiate themselves. They tell their story, they show how they will style women, they talk a little bit about their fashion philosophy. And so, thinking of ways to change a little bit of like the marketing strategy, not only raise that average order value, but made, their actual number of sales went up too. And it was,
Totally.
Dude, and when you can do that and do that successfully, it just gives you so much more oxygen in your ability to continue investing in ads. Like the return on ad spend, like you said, it's really a question of cash flow and getting that back in a short amount of time, because there's a chance that, even at the lower average order value, if they had the investment to continue putting into the ads, but have the ability to wait for the buyback period. Like maybe that customer who did come in at a $70 average order value, maybe they will purchase 3 or 4 more times that year, and it will, like at the end of the year, become like a good profitable thing. But when you can shorten that time period, raise the average order value, raise the return on ad spend, it just gives you such a better ability to be able to continue investing into your ads and grow faster.
Yeah, and we've gone through this a lot in our agency and our own growth of always increasing our average order value, right? I remember when we first started, had our first client, we were charging like $500 a month. And we very quickly realized that's not sustainable. We can't build a team around that.
Yeah.
Like we have to increase that. How do we increase that? We come out with a better product or service in our case that people are willing to spend more money on. And so through our journey over the years, we went from $500 a month to slowly increasing that, building a better product and service. And now we're able to charge, a really premium price for a really good service that we provide, but it didn't happen overnight for us. We had to kind of gradually build up and think, what do the customers want? What do they need? How can we make it better? And always improving upon that to now we're considered a premium agency in the eComm world. So,
and even at a higher retainer, it's still a no-brainer because of the results we provide.
Totally. And it helped us, like you said, almost going like for that eComm store, it was attracting higher end customers. Well, it's the same thing for our agency, where we're now attracting bigger businesses that will happily pay that to see the growth that we're providing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's just there's 330 million people in America. Like there's a lot of people with a lot of expendable income out there. And
yeah,
I don't think that it's that hard to unless you like really have your business dialed in, to chunk up 10, 20% on the average order value. You guys mentioned one thing important, that's pricing. Like we talked about bundling for that customer, but just maybe consider raising your prices. Like I have a jewelry client who, they have kind of like in the family, they have another business that sells a very similar product, right?
Yeah.
And this is actually kind of a whole story about discounts. Like I looked at their family's, website, and I noticed like, okay, their products are same product, 15% higher, right? And my client's offering like a 5% deeper discount, and like, some of the add-on features, he's like a little bit less than them. And he was just like 5 to 10%ing himself to death. And I'm like, look, if you compare the exact same product on, their website versus yours, like they're actually selling it 40% higher, like one of your most popular products, and I'm trying to, tell him like, you're worried about a 5% increase in price, like people won't pay it, but they will. And we actually ran an A/B test, and this was what I was telling you before we turned the mics on. One ad saying like a significant discount, like 40% discount or something. And another ad, same ad, and just left out that discount. It actually got a far higher click-through rate, not putting the discount in. Because I think at some point, you cheapen your brand. You can. I mean, you talk about $500 a month for an eComm agency like what we do. It's not worth it. If someone told me they would do something for really, really cheap, I'd go like, I don't know. Why is it so cheap? Right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
In the e-commerce world, there's so much junk out there, and shoppers are really sophisticated. And so if you're like trying to compete with somebody who's outsourcing products from like AliExpress or something, and it's like this counterfeit of a real product, they're gonna put you in that group with them, and they're not gonna touch your stuff. And so that's a really cool story about pretty much the exact same product. Only difference is the price point, maybe like some brand momentum, some longevity and stuff there. But I think you're definitely right. And if you go too low on price, it's actually gonna like have people have like red flags going off and say like, well, is this really what I want? Is this really high quality?
Yeah. Price wars too are always a race to the bottom,
Yeah.
If you can be cheaper than the next guy, he'll be cheaper than you, and it just race to the bottom.
Yeah.
But if you can distinguish yourself as selling really good products, having really good return policies, shipping policies, all these things, people are going to be more likely to trust you and shop with you and spend more, pay more for your product.
Yeah. I think people online think in this terms of like neighborhood idea. And what I mean by that is like, if you have two competing businesses and they're right next door to each other, like it's really easy for that person to go over to the next one and look at it. But you'd think it'd be that easy online, but like in these small and medium-sized e-comm companies, I think that, like these aren't big brand names. And so people don't necessarily like shop so close. They can't necessarily compare the prices that easy. So they're not going to be like, yours is $5 cheaper, I'm going to go with you. It's like, if you present the product in the right way through Facebook and Instagram ads and you get them into your business, like they'll be your loyal customer. Not every single one of them is just trying to get 10% off.
Yeah, and these businesses are pretty unique where you can't like just go to Amazon too and find it for cheaper on there. So like I think once you have them in, you're gonna get them if you have a good product.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's easier than ever to find things online, but it's also like so vast. There's so much information. There's so many products that it's a kind of a barrier to finding items. So if you have a unique product or item, like you probably have a little more pricing power than you think.
Yeah, man, that's all really good stuff. Did you have any other things that it feels like are conversations you're trying to invite people into? Maybe some numbers you're trying to get people to look at that for whatever reason just kind of gets pushed to the side?
Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of similar to this, but one thing I'm always looking at is margins. It's so frustrating for me to go into a common sold account and week after week see like, wow, we're up 50% from a revenue standpoint, and like from an ad standpoint, it looked like we're doing great, and like the margins, the gross profit is similar, like not flat, but it's not growing nearly as much, And I think you got to really sanity check your product mix, especially for clients that have large inventories. Like you can pick and choose. If you got one item, or a very low number of SKUs, you can only sell so many things. But I try to encourage clients to go for higher margin items, go for higher end items, and like let's test those. I had one client who is in the arts and crafts space who we took over their advertising. They were doing it in-house before. They've been doing really great. They have a great business and a great product, but they were really focused on the daily deals, right? And they would mark their items down like 50%. And they had great return on ad spend before, probably like a 10x before they worked with Shopanova. Working with us, we have not quite that high, but almost, but we do not mention the daily deal at all. And their margins, like actually their business is increased substantially from a
way better,
profit margin standpoint, because they're not just selling things that are 50% off every day.
How receptive are people, like when you're maybe making a suggestion towards, hey, we actually need to figure out how to increase this average order value, or you should maybe consider charging a little bit more for this product? how receptive are people to making those changes in their stores, and what are some limiting beliefs that keep people that make people resist those kind of suggestions?
I think people are mostly receptive. You know, they're making a big commitment financially into us. They know that we know what we're doing and they believe in us. So if I have suggestions, they're generally open to taking them.
Have you ever gotten pushback on, suggestions that you make?
Yeah, I have. And I think they might just disagree. They might just say, I don't think we could sell this for higher. You know, personally, I try to talk to them about, let's just run a test. The beautiful thing about selling online, right, is like you can always just throw a little money at something, or you can change the price for a week and we'll know what the conversion rate is like right away. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so they're open to that. The other thing is just, it's mundane, but it's like inertia. You know, everybody is really busy and that's a good idea. You know, maybe I'll do that another time. Yeah. Right? It's like talking to clients about apps or something, that's probably the biggest pushback, where it's like, okay, well, you get me some more sales and like, let's revisit this next week, and I'm trying to say like, this will help your marketing efforts. So that's probably the biggest pushback that I get. Yeah,
it's just not prioritizing it, wanting to create some room before making that change, stuff like that.
Exactly.
So before we hit record on all this, we were kind of talking about another thing that you like to look at, and in e-commerce, there's always this, you're going to get the best results in your funnel out of the middle of the funnel and out of the bottom of the funnel, but it gets a little tricky on, like, you can always just put more money top of funnel, but more specifically, what are some ways that people can be getting more leverage out of, say, a middle of funnel campaign? Because I know you have some pretty specific ideas on what that could look like.
Yeah, absolutely. Middle of funnel, it changes per client. Sometimes it's like a little better than top of funnel. Sometimes it blows it out of the water, right? When you have a really strong middle of funnel campaign, I think that, we'll start with typical warm target audiences like social engagers, website visitors. Those are the most obvious ones, right? When I see a middle of funnel campaign doing really well, the only thing that's limiting it is really the size of that audience, right? And you want to then look at how can you expand that warm audience. And as video has gotten more and more important in Facebook and Instagram advertising, and as it's I would say video is king over still images for 80% of my clients. And we're pouring more money into top of funnel, you have this huge video views audience, right? And if you're making a 60 second, 120 second video, if somebody's watching half of that, like that in the internet age, like that's a lot of somebody's attention that you're actually getting. And so I've had a lot of success recently for middle funnel audiences that are doing well, expanding that audience into like 50% video views, even 25% if they're long enough, and dropping it in there because they know your face and they know your brand at that point, and then up in the budget.
It's a lot cheaper to get video views than it is to get someone all the way to your site and start retargeting them, right? It's like 2 cents or 10 cents for a good video view. It depends on how much they're watching, but to get someone to your website, it can be like up to $1. So essentially for like a tenth of the cost, you can build up your like retargeting audience. Yeah, they're not quite as warm, but it's still like you can really build it up and keep scaling middle and bottom of funnel. I actually have some buddies that created this super unique product. They actually invented it. They didn't know anything about Facebook ads, but they're only running brand awareness video views, top of funnel, no retargeting. And they were getting like a 3x return, which just goes to show, like, if you have a really good product, create the exposure and awareness, like it can take off even if you're not running for like strictly conversions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's another conversation we like to have, is there's a lot of like, you can overcomplicate this stuff. It's really easy to dissect and overcomplicate things. But at the end of the day, for somebody to buy your product, they need to know who you are. And I think it's really easy because there's so many tools available in the online space, so many things available to e-commerce stores that are going to incrementally increase, certain conversion rates, certain values of like average order values, stuff like that. There's like, you can get lost in that stuff pretty easy. Sometimes it's really nice just to rewind a little bit and just think about marketing in the pure sense of the word. It's just like getting brand awareness out there, getting people to know who you are. And then, yes, there's a nurturing system that happens after that. But like you said, these guys, they're a good business, they have a good product. And as long as people are figuring out who they are, they're going to start to make something happen.
Totally.
From there, it's just a lot of optimization and figuring out how to do that in the most efficient way possible. And that's where agencies like ours are really helpful, because we can optimize that and we can take something that's, not at all profitable, turn it profitable and scale it. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, like I always say, this is like a really good topic for one podcast, but not one that you'd want to like revisit over and over. But dude, my philosophy on ads and ad campaigns, it's really simple. Like, you just got to get people to know who you are and get them to buy, and just don't overcomplicate it, and you'll be good. I think it's easy to get lost for sure.
Yeah. So going back to your point, Dan, about the video views audience, like I actually think in some cases video views might be warmer than clicks, and I know that.
Hey, don't disagree. Don't disagree with me publicly, bro. I'm just kidding.
That's rule number 1 in the employee handbook.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, you think about it, I'll click through to a website for a variety of reasons. Like, one of them is an accident. My thumb slipped and I hit shop now. That's a click, right?
Yeah.
Another thing, if I want to do like a quick price check or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of not very engaging reasons someone could go to your website. But if someone is sitting and watching 50% of a minute or 2 minute long video or 3 minute long video, arguably that is warmer in some cases. So I would just definitely emphasize like.
And you think about how much information you can communicate and how much value you can provide in a 30-second video, as opposed to like how much information you can give to somebody in an above the fold web page. Like, it's a lot of information. So in that regard, I'd agree that they're learning a lot about this brand, they're investing in it with their interest, and it is a warm audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And they know you. Like, you talk about keeping it simple, and I always tell clients, especially the one I talked about with that average order value that jumped from 70 to over 250. They're not an older couple, but middle-aged, and they definitely did not get into the business to like be making cell phone videos, right? I mean, they look at it as this is the millennial TikTok generation. But I'm like, look, you got to get in front of a camera, and like, no, I'm bad in front of a camera. I'm like, it does not matter. Like, it shocks me how amateur, like or not amateur, but how unhighly produced ads can be. And this is where the internet's going. It's like, TikTok, Twitch, whatever, Barstool Sports, like Twitter personalities, like they're amateur content creators. They're not polished, and it feels real, and people engage with that. And so, kind of to your point, like keeping it simple, is the way to go.
Yeah, dude, people buy from people, and I think as a society right now, I think there's a huge craving for authenticity. I think people who grew up with a cell phone in their hand just want real connections, real relationships, real experiences. And so I think, even, unpolished content, user-generated content being more likable, more clickable, I feel like that's the first step on a wave toward a whole society moving towards authenticity and real experiences. Because if you grow up in an internet bubble, like, that just doesn't sustain you as a human.
Right.
And so it's good to be aware of.
Alex, I know you have some interesting thoughts on how much you should be spending at different revenue levels. We have big clients that are spending a very tiny percentage and it's not making a huge dent in their business.
Yeah.
But then we have smaller clients spending more than that bigger client, and they're seeing aggressive, scalable growth. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is just a sanity check thing that every business that's marketing needs to do. So I had one client, and they're doing, several $100,000s in revenue a month, and they looked at our ad campaigns, and we were doing great. We had like a 10x in the 30-day window. Like, we were doing awesome from a return on ad spend perspective, and they're like, our business isn't growing. And so it always comes down to this question. It's like, your ads aren't working, or you get this attribution question all the time. That's like, are you really doing it? Or are we doing it?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, let's take a step back. How much are you spending on ads? And it turned out it was like, 3%, 4% of the revenue on ads. And if you're getting a 10x consistently, which is hard, I will tell every client, like, if you're depending on a consistent 10x, like, we got to change something, because your performance is going to fluctuate, and this is like particularly hot. You're looking at, that's 25-30% of your revenue every month max, that's coming from advertisement, and we are hitting current customers, and so it's just not moving the needle as much as I think at that level. So, if you're getting a great return on ad spend and you don't feel like your business is growing that much, it's like, you got to really look at how much you're spending on advertising.
Yeah.
And I would up that, significantly. And we scaled them like significantly after that conversation.
Yeah. And so we can look at it and we could say, 3%'s pretty low. I'd be curious to know, maybe as we bring on more guests and more online store owners, like, what feels comfortable for them and their perfect profit and loss statement. Like, how much are they allocating toward advertising? And, there's a lot to consider as an e-commerce store owner. You got cost of goods sold, you got everything happening with fulfillment and shipping and stuff like that. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, that number, that percentage needs to be determined by the business owner, because we don't have all the financial insights that they do as the owner of that business. But we can look at 3%, and if you're getting a 10x return on ad spend, we can say, that's probably pretty low. And then, just to give a little bit of perspective, Daniel, what percentage of like overall revenue do we spend on advertising per month?
Yeah, we're up to at least 20%, but there's some months we've been up to 30 to 40%. So it kind of varies, but something you said, what's comfortable to you? Spending $100,000 a month on ads is never comfortable to me, because, then it goes to our sales guys and we rely on them closing and sticking around long term. Like, it's always, in my opinion, a leap of faith to start spending that much money, like, to see the returns. You're not, a lot of times, not going to immediately see it, but you have to understand the process enough to know, like, this is going to really help the longevity of my business, and it's a long-term investment I'm making right now. And it might not be instant gratification. A lot of times it is. What's crazy with Facebook advertising and e-commerce, but sometimes
so quick,
it's an investment you're making that you're going to see compound over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it happens fast, but it doesn't happen in 1 week,
Exactly.
I mean, it could happen, you can really move the needle over 60 days, like pretty significantly, but you can't just flip a switch and like double your business. I always tell clients, it's like, if one's come in and they start spending $100 a day on Instagram, Facebook ads, that is our defensive position. That's our validate the funnel level. Like, you're going to have a really difficult time covering your Facebook ads and our services at that level. Like, we have to get up to, I always give them like kind of 300, 400 at least a day in order before you're kind of comfortably making money. And if you have a performing ad campaign, like, you're actually de-risking, I think, by scaling up, because you're not getting eaten alive by overhead costs if you drop from a, I don't know, a 7x to a 4x or something. I mean, obviously I'm making these numbers up. Not everybody has this level, but so trying to get people to think like that is important.
And I think it's just one of those things that business owners need to be aware of, that it goes against human nature to spend more. It feels risky, it feels vulnerable, but like, as you said, especially if you're paying an agency like us or somebody else, it's really a lot easier to offset costs. And it doesn't even have to be an agency. It could just be like your internal costs, to run your team, to run your fulfillment. Like, to offset that, you need to inflate what's happening in marketing and sales to be able to offset that. But it feels uncomfortable. And so the more you can kind of dig into that and see what that looks like, do a little test, start to run some numbers in your head. Like, what happens if I add a couple zeros to my ad spend and that, proportionally happens to my sales? what does that do to my overall profit and loss statement?
This is rent. It's like, people think you move online, you don't have the costs associated with a storefront, and that's true, but why do you rent a store on Main Street in your town? Or like, why do you rent a store on Michigan Avenue in Chicago? It's like, it's foot traffic. It's people getting in front of you. This is the online equivalent of that. Like, you have to get traffic into your store. I try and get people to think like that. I'm trying to think. You mentioned one thing. That's something I'm sure was very insightful about it, but I forgot.
I don't know, dude. I guess at the end of the day, when I'm looking at growing, if I'm trying to develop a strategy to grow any business, the simplest terms I can think of is like get more people to purchase, get them to spend more, and get them to purchase more frequently. If you can do those three things, all those actions compound together, and we've done examples where if you increase even just 25% in those three areas, when they get compounded together, it's actually like 98% in growth, because it's growth times growth times growth in three areas. And then you can almost like double your business with a 25% increase in those three areas. And it's super easy to look at that in terms of e-commerce, because do 25% better in customer acquisition, perfect. Do 25% better in average order value, perfect, and 25% better in repeat purchasers, and you're already on a trajectory to double your business. And so sometimes it's helpful for me just to like think of things in really simple terms. And at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about always looking at the big picture, and that's one thing that I just so appreciate about you and like some of our other account managers, is having the ability to keep people focused on the big picture. Because if we go too far down one rabbit hole, we're going to miss the whole point, and we're going to start making bad decisions.
Guys, we're coming up on our time here, but super enjoyed having you on, Alex. It was a really good time. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. If you guys enjoyed this episode, share with your friends, rate, review, subscribe, do all the good things, and we'll see you guys next time.